let's get to it. We're going to go ahead and talk about my top 10 favorite movies of all time. So again, listen, this list could change by tomorrow. It can change from a week from now, Chad. These are just really 10 movies that I love. Not saying that they're even like the best movies of all time. I'm not saying that, they're perfect films. Like, I'm sure they have their flaws and we can critique them and such. These are just like 10 movies that like I truly love, that I can literally put on any time of the day at any point and just enjoy them. And these are movies I've seen over and over and over again. And yeah, they're just these are the kind of films that are just kind of really near and dear to me and very close to my heart, and ones that I'll be watching, this year and for many years afterwards, Chad, until I'm an old man. And who knows? Maybe in the however many years I still have left, Chad. Like, hey, let's say a nice 100 years in the future, I'll have even more movies, and maybe it might change. But these movies are just like super special to me, and I imagine they're super special to a lot of you guys too. But my friends, we're going to go over my top 10. We're going to start with number 10. And again, the order of these can change anytime. But we'll go from 10 and then all the way down to my number one favorite movie of all time. But, chap, we got to start with my 10th favorite movie of all time. And that is Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I've done an audio commentary for this movie. I've done a review for this movie. I've talked about it often on stream. Like, this is a diamond of a film. This is just a very rare type of movie because it is shocking that it was even made in the first place. I mean, number one, you had Disney and Warner Brothers somehow come together, somehow were able to negotiate to have their characters share screen time. That wasn't like a drug PSA special, like Cartoon All-Stars. Like, no, we're going to have our characters come together, interact with each other in a 1940s noir mystery movie. The fact that even happened is mind-boggling, and that's why something like this literally really hasn't happened since then. Like, we've had things that maybe have come close. Like, I would say, Rescue Rangers, a movie that I had a lot of misgivings about. You guys know, I was like, I don't know about this. It feels like probably the closest natural successor to Who Framed Roger Rabbit. But we've had so many awful would-be sequels or films that fancied themselves sequels to Who Framed Roger Rabbit, like Space Jam and Space Jam 2 and Looney Tunes Back in Action. Garbage, trash compared to this little diamond of the movie. I mean, yeah, it's fun to see Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny on screen together, interacting, literally exchanging dialogue. That's great. But the thing that works about this movie is that it has a really good story to it. We're following this private detective, played by the late great Bob Hoskins, one of my favorite actors of all time. He's an alcoholic. He's constantly in debt, constantly doing just weird things just to earn a little bit of cash, Chat, to get through the next day. He finds himself embroiled in this conspiracy, this murder mystery in which, this lead star, Roger Rabbit, is accused of murdering this business owner, this film producer, Acme. And, he's trying to clear his name, but also find out, what's this conspiracy? What's this conspiracy involving Toontown? Possibly the complete destruction of it. And again, you won't see another movie like this ever made again. I really do. I mean, again, you came close to something like Rescue Rangers, but the fact that this movie had so much mature themes in it, everything to do with the sex, racism, even the swearing in it, it's just something like this will probably never be made again. You'll have knockoff type films or things that think they're just as good as Roger Rabbit, but they all pale in comparison to this movie. I also think this might be a controversial statement to make. I think this is personally Robert Zemeckis' best film, which again, man has made many great movies. I mean, Back to the Future is an all-time classic, Chad. It's a wonderful film, but for me, this is his best movie just because I can't believe this happened. It's kind of a miracle that this movie happened, and there is so much. The level of detail in this film is incredible. One, you already have a great story, wonderful chemistry between, all the stars, of course, both human and cartoon and animated, right? But you can watch this movie again, and there'll always be like a new thing you never saw in the background, a little detail in the background, and I love it for that. That's why it's like, oh, it's always something new. It's always an adventure watching this film. Yeah, I thoroughly love this movie. It is incredible. It's the perfect. I also think it's the perfect blending of live action and animation together. You know, I think, yeah, only Rescue Rangers maybe comes close, but it's like a distant second to this movie. I don't think anything else has touched this. It is perfect. It is, yeah, it's one of the greatest films of the 1980s, and just I think one of the greatest films of all time. And every year I just have a renewed appreciation for it every single time I watch it. So Who and Roger Rabbit, just my number 10, favorite film, chat, of all time. Well, moving on from Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Hey, you're talking about noir, talking about mystery, talking about gangsters. I got to bring up this film, chap. My number 9 favorite film of all time, Martin Scorsese's Goodfellas. You know, I feel like when a lot of people say, like, what's the greatest crime movie? What's the greatest mob movie? I feel like a lot of people would bring up Francis Ford Coppola's Godfather. It's a great movie. It really is, you know. But I'm the guy that kind of likes Godfather Part 2 a little bit more than the original Godfather. And if I have any critiques about the original Godfather, is that I feel like it really romanticizes the mob a lot. But I don't have that complaint with Martin Scorsese's Goodfellas, because it shows these people as the criminals, the scumbags, the murderers, the monsters that they are, while also being a really thoroughly entertaining movie throughout. I mean, this is like, what, nearly a 3-hour epic, chat, but the pacing, it moves so fast as we see this, the life of Henry Hill, which is based off, you know, the real life Henry Hill. Obviously, they changed things for the sake of the movie, for the storytelling, of course. But we follow this guy's life as he grows into a mobster and an associate to the mob family that he works for, as he was like a teenage kid all the way until he's an adult man, until eventually it all falls apart, because of course it always does. That's what happens, chat, when you're all addicted to the coke and the women and the crime and the murder and everything else. But it doesn't romanticize the mob at all. Like, it has these moments of like, oh, this is the great life, but there's always like a darkness behind all of it. It's always the part, it's like, yeah, you have this right now, but then it can quickly fall apart because of all of the poor life choices you make. And Scorsese's direction in this is so inspiring. I mean, everything, just like how he just sets up certain scenes, like how he builds tension, like with, you know, Joe Pesci's character of Tommy. Everything that he has that interaction with the other mobsters released out of jail. He's like, I used to know you as a kid. You used to shine my shoes. Go get your shine box. Like, all that. How does this build over time? It's perfect. It just ratchets up until it explodes. And that has like an amazing cause and effect in the film. Or even like just like the technical aspects of it, where we have that amazing long take where we have Ray Liotta's character taking Lorraine Bracco. That's the actress who plays Karen. They go from outside the club and they go into the kitchen, then they go out into the club floor and they sit down, they watch the comedy special. Like, all that being done in one take is like, wow, this is so amazing. You know, everyone, you know, film fans love the one take shot, and they're extraordinarily difficult to do just because of the camera and the positioning and the actors and all the extras. Like, it's mind-boggling how difficult that actually is. But then in the cast, I mean, you have an amazing cast in this movie. Obviously, you know, Ray Liotta being the main lead, the main person we're focusing on. Joe Pesci is one of his Oscar, Chad. I mean, I think this is the quintessential Joe Pesci, you know, performance. It's the one we always think of initially. Robert De Niro does such a great job in this film. Paul Sorvino, I mean, this is an amazing supporting cast as well. I mean, of primary characters, secondary characters, tertiary characters. Like, every scene, so much of this film kind of feels like it's like a slice of life movie in a way, where we're just seeing like Henry Hill's life, however many decades, you know. But it has this continuous story of this rise and this, you know, catastrophic fall of this mobster and how he takes everyone with him. It's brilliant. And when I think for a lot of people, when they hear the name Martin Scorsese, you know, I think some people think of Taxi Driver first. Maybe they think of Raging Bull, you know. Or maybe something more recent works. Maybe like The Departed or The Wolf of Wall Street. But for me, when I hear Martin Scorsese, the first image, the first movie that comes to my mind is Goodfellas. I think this is his masterpiece. I think this is his magnum opus, Chad. I think this is the film people are going to think about when when he's gone. I think this will be like the first film people mention. It'll be the first film people, I think, watch when that happens. And it's a great film. It has all of his skills as a filmmaker, everything that he's so good at, I think is distilled into this one movie. And not to say like he hasn't made other great films, believe me. I mean, Casino, which I think he did however many years after this one, feels almost like a natural successor, almost like a sort of sequel, if you will, spiritual sequel to Goodfellas, is great. I love a lot of his crime movies, a lot of his stuff in the 2000s. He did some great movies in the 2000s. Gangs of New York, of course, and The Departed, I think, is fantastic, and The Aviator, and all those. But yeah, Goodfellas for me is just that perfect mob movie where it doesn't sugarcoat it. It shows these guys, yeah, it's like, oh yeah, they have it's the best for them. It's it's great. But deep down, it's like this can all fucking fall apart so easily, and they're all like really horrible people. Oh, and just a huge shout out to the one scene, one of the greatest improvised scenes I think in film history. Cape Fear is excellent. Cape Fear is an amazing movie. Agreed. Love Cape Fear. That's an underrated Martin Scorsese movie in my opinion. But that one scene, that improvised scene where Joe Pesci is telling that story, and he's like, they're all in the club of all the guys, and they're all laughing. Ray Liotta goes, man, that's really funny. And he's like, what do you mean? What do you mean that's funny? He's like, no, I mean, it's this funny story. He's like, you think I'm funny? You think I'm a fucking clown? Do I entertain you? And just like no one is saying a word, and you can hear a pin drop and all that. It's like, and based on everything we've seen of the Tommy character so far, Joe Pesci's character in the movie, it's like he's gonna lose his fucking mind. He's gonna kill Ray Liotta right here. He's like, I gotcha. But it's like we know this guy is capable of enormous violence because we've already seen it, and it's great. It's great. And he won the Oscar for it, and he deserved it. Such an amazing film, Chet. Absolutely love it. One of the greatest crime movies, if not the great. I think it is the greatest mob movie of all time. I think it's probably the greatest crime movie of all time. But that's just my opinion. Absolutely love it, Chef. One of my favorite, my number 9 favorite film ever. Let's switch genres, chat. Let's switch genres right now, okay? And this is like a blend of different genres. But my number 8 favorite film of all time. It's a sci-fi fantasy film, and that is The Empire Strikes Back. Specifically, Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. So, I mean, listen. I originally saw the Star Wars trilogy, the original Star Wars trilogy, when they re-released it in the late 90s. This was in anticipation for Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. And these were the special editions. And I saw a New Hope as a kid, and it blew my mind. I was like, oh, this is great. But there was something about, like, Empire. Even as a kid when I was watching this, however old I was, like 7 or 8 years old, I was pretty young. But even I just noticed that the tone was radically different. That it was just something. It was often the best way possible. It's like, okay, the stakes were raised. Our characters' backs were against the wall, if you will. They were separated because, it takes place after A New Hope, where after this, this amazing finale where they had this huge battle, this win against the Empire, destroyed the Death Star, chap. It's like, what happens later? Takes place years later. Where are our characters? The rebels are still on the run. The Galactic Civil War is still going on. And like the movie, like even how the movie opens up, it's infinitely darker. Like, it opens up with our main character, Luke Skywalker, getting attacked by a fucking wampa, by a goddamn Sasquatch, and the abominable snowman, chat, and dragging him away. It's like, oh my, he's the star. What are you doing? Like, I was like, oh my God, like already, that kind of freaked me out as a kid. These immediately attack, hunt upside down, and it's about to be disemboweled and like eaten alive. Like already, it's like, wow, something, it's just darker. Plus the environment too. I mean, yeah, we had seen like the desert planet of Tatooine, and we've seen the galaxy, the Star Wars, in space, and then Yavin 4, which is jungle planet. But even like starting the snow, there was just something about there. It made it not only figuratively darker, but like literally darker too, just like a cold, and like everything just felt like more dangerous in that movie. And just that excellent opening with the Battle of Hoth, with the showing, hey, it's like, hey, we want to show the power of the Empire. Like, they're literally striking back. We have these giant, huge mechanical monstrosities, the AT-ATs, the armored walkers, like, so good. But even Vader felt more threatening in the movie. Before, he was kind of like the secondary guy to, like, Tarkin, but here he feels like very much in control. There's something different about him as a character. It looks like he was a man on a mission. And just like our heroes, like, separating in that movie, and everyone's kind of on the run. Like Luke has his storyline, Han and Leia, whose relationship is deepening. Their relationship is more complicated. It's not just, they have the bickering like they did in the original, but there's a romance, there's love there. And they go off on their adventure. And then, Luke, who was this, this farm kid who was like yearning for that adventure, wanting to do more of his life, and now he's confused, he's frustrated, like he needs to do these things, but he can't do these things, and he meets this figure who he dismisses initially, trained to be the person who he wants to grow into being, and then all of it culminating, and it ends in a very dark way. Han being captured, frozen, carbonated, seemingly dead, and Luke confronting his worst fear, the man who killed his father figure, Ben Kenobi. And the man who killed his father figure is his actual father, Darth Vader, in one of the greatest film twists of all time. If not, it's either one of the greatest or the greatest film twist in all time. Because again, I saw this as a kid with no idea what Star Wars even was. I saw New Hope whenever it came out, and then I saw Empire, and I was like, my whole world was shattered. It's like, this dad? This monster, this cyborg, absolutely amazing. And even the effects, you could say like dated or whatever by today's standards, sure, but the imagination, the sheer imagination in this movie is amazing. Just all these different worlds, the sense of history to it. We explore more planets in Empire than we do in A New Hope, or Hoth to Bespin to Dagobah. We see the might of the Empire. We see AT-ATs. We see ATSs. We see super, not Star Destroyers, super Star Destroyers. It's just like they escalated everything. The characters have more depth to them. The performances are more dynamic. It has my favorite lightsaber duel in the entire franchise. You could say like the choreography is not as good as maybe this or that or the prequels. It's the emotion behind it, the fear behind it. It's one of the greatest sci-fi fantasy films of all time. It blends those genres so well. Irving Kershner provided such depth to those characters. Like famously, him and Harrison Ford like rewrote so much of this movie while making. You can feel that. Yes, it has the ideas of George Lucas, it has the character of George Lucas, but it's being written and almost controlled by someone who kind of even knows it better than him and knows he wants to like do different things with these characters, but still makes them feel like they're not like just taking them in a different direction or repeating the same thing over again. So we're going to do something new, but we're not going to be repetitive, but they're going to still feel very earnest always. And I just love that about this movie. And it's great. I love the original Star Wars trilogy. I love New Hope. I love Return of the Jedi. I think Jedi is a great third movie. Couple of flaws, but I still really enjoy it. But yeah, Empire, I think for a lot of people, it's like this. When you think of Star Wars, you think of The Empire Strikes Back. And it's an incredible movie. So good and amazingly influential. So much so that throughout the 70s, the late 70s, and all throughout the 80s, you had so many ripoffs of Star Wars, chat. It changed that, and Jaws changed the face of movie making forever. But Empire is my absolute favorite. Such a great film. Moving on from live action stuff. I covered a lot of live action movies, chat, but I also have a love of animation. You guys know that I do audio commentaries for animated movies. I do reviews for animated films and TV shows, of course. But I wanted to bring up one of my favorite movies of all time, my 7th favorite movie of all time, and that is Princess Mononoke. Now, I've often talked about Studio Ghibli and the works of Hayao Miyazaki. Chad, he's done some great stuff, all the way back from like Lupin the Third to Nazca in the Valley of the Wind and Laputa, Castle in the Sky. And I think for a lot of people of like my generation, millennials, they were first exposed to Studio Ghibli and Hayao Miyazaki through Spirited Away. And I think maybe I was too as well. I saw Spirited Away and was kind of like blown away by like, wow, this movie's fantastic. But soon afterwards, I went and I think it was on HBO or something, but I saw Princess Mononoke for the first time, which I know this movie came out before Spirited Away. It came out like 1997, 98, in the late 90s. And for those that don't know, it initially follows this character named Prince Ashitaka, who defeats this great demon beast, but he's infected by it. And it's slowly killing him over time. He has to seek out what is causing these great gods of this earth to suddenly attack humans, and he learns of this village that is mining all these resources, basically destroying the environment around themselves and causing all these great beasts, these divine gods, to fight back, but it turns them into demons, monstrosities, and he encounters Princess Mononoke, who is this girl who is the adopted daughter of this wolf goddess and her cubs, who fights against these miners, these humans. And it's about their relationship throughout the movie and how they try to get the humans and the creatures of the forest to live in peace. And I just noticed, like, after watching Spirited Away, and I'd seen some other Miyazaki's movies, and like a lot of those films do very mature concepts. There's no doubt about that. But this one just felt like more mature. It just felt darker. It almost felt like, I don't know if I should be watching this, right? I was pretty young when I first saw this. And like, there's like a lot of blood. There's a lot of violence, a lot of death. Like, I think even in one point, Princess Achitaka, like, he kills like a lot of characters. I mean, I think he like uses bow and arrow because he gets so strong because of his infection. He shoots the arrow off, and it blows up this guy's arms. This soldier's just, he's like, at one point. Like, oh my God. So just like the fact that it was a much darker movie already, was like, oh, it intrigued me. It really intrigued me. But just the beauty of it. There's something about the animation, how it was fantastical, it was whimsical, but just the way in which it showcased nature. And I just love these characters that exist in this world. And the conflict was, I mean, it was literally like could all be destroyed. But I think what also just helped about it, it just kind of hit me in my emotional core, was the music. The music in this movie, it's one of my favorite film scores of all time. Like, my favorite song in this, which is, I think it's just called either Ashitaka or Prince Ashitaka, that and just how it's just like when it hits, when they know exactly when to play it in the movie. And when they do, I don't know, it was not even like a sad scene in the film, but it was like at one point when they played that music and we're just going, I started crying. I got like really water-eyed watching this movie. And that was just because I felt like I was watching, like, this is something truly special. It wasn't necessarily a sad scene. It was just like, I'm just appreciating this art. I'm appreciating the artwork that Hayao Miyazaki put in this, and all of his filmmakers and all of his entire team put into this movie. And I think this is his magnum opus. I know a lot of people would say Spirited Away or this or that, but for me, like, this, when I think of Studio Ghibli, this is the first movie I think of. It is incredible. Absolutely love it, chat. And yes, my favorite Studio Ghibli film, and one of my favorite animated films of all time. But is it my favorite animated film of all time? Well, chat, I think that film might be reserved for number 6. And my 6th favorite film of all time is The Incredibles. Listen, Pixar has made a lot of great movies over the years. I mean, all the way starting back in 1995 with Toy Story. You gotta remember, chat, like, Pixar, like, really changed theatrical animation for the good and bad. I think you can make an argument for both sides. You know, like, 3D animation, that blew everyone away back in the 90s, in the mid 90s, right? Where 2D, that was the form of animation that we saw both on TV and in theaters. I mean, during that time, during the 90s, Disney was still going through the Renaissance era with things like Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin and the Lion King, Little Mermaid, all of that, right? But Pixar changed the game of Toy Story. Even as a kid, when I saw it in the theater, I was like, "Oh, I'd never seen anything like that." Was like the most mind blowing piece of animation I ever saw. And they had released films, for years since, and Bug's Life and Toy Story 2, Monsters Inc., right? But I don't know, this movie hit me at a really good time, because by this point I had already consumed content like Batman animated series, so I was already aware of superheroes. I was watching superhero movies. I was reading superhero content. And the fact that, like, Pixar was like, they were going to do like their own superhero movie, I was like, oh wow, okay, that'd be really cool. And what they offered was The Incredibles, which, of course, directed by Brad Bird, who had already proven himself with films like The Iron Giant, super underrated Iron Giant. Not so much. Now that's a film that went from like being an underrated movie that now it is part of the mainstream, pop culture, which is so interesting. Since it's always referenced. But like, this entire movie is Brad Bird's homage to Golden Age, Silver Age comics, to spy films. A lot of James Bond DNA in this movie, but also it's the best adaptation of the Fantastic Four ever. That's this crazy thing people always say, like, a lot, not always, but But there's a lot of people out there. It's like, why do the Fantastic Four? The Fantastic Four is lame. It's like, you can never do it. Never adapt it well. It's like, The Incredibles is the Fantastic Four. It's obvious. It's about a super family. All right? Even some of the powers are the same. But like the whole general premise, like you initially follow this superhero, Bob, Mr. Incredible, who is living in this kind of like, how the movie starts, like the entire prologue set in like the 1940s during like the golden age, right? And how he's like so happy, and he meets this, woman, Helen, Elastigirl, right? Like Mr. Fantastic. Got those curves, Jack. And they love their lives being superheroes, but then they introduce something that's pretty much like the Superhero Registration Act, where people don't want superheroes anymore and they got to go into hiding. Now we're in the 19th. I love that it's a period piece. And again, the look of the aesthetic of this movie is perfect. It's perfect, both in the 40s and then obviously went into the early 60s. I think it was 1962, the majority of the film. But when we at that part of the movie, I love that it's a character who's going through a midlife crisis, an existential crisis. He's 20 years older. He's fat. He's not happy with the family that he has, but he's just remembering that adventure. He thinks that's what he wants. And when he gets the opportunity to don the costume again, it's a struggle for him, but it almost feels like his life is coming back together, but it's all based on a lie. And then of course, later on revealed, great twist. The villain in the movie is the would-be sidekick he spurned years ago. Syndrome, when everyone's super, no one will be. One of my absolute favorite, I think he is my favorite Pixar villain, one of my favorite Disney villains of all time, has spent his entire life trying to create a weapon to fight against, so people would fall in love with him. But he in the process killed dozens, if not hundreds, of other superpowered people. Ends up capturing Bob, seemingly killing him, and the family of the Incredibles has to come together. They have to be honest with each other and defeat him. It's a great story. It has a beautiful aesthetic. Again, a great score. For me, this is Pixar at their best. But even like when we're not even thinking about like, or even when they're doing like the actions, there's just a lot of great action in this movie. There's just so many scenes in this film where it's just people talking to each other. You almost like, hey, this is an animated film, but you have at one point in the movie, like Bob and Helen are fighting. They're arguing with each other, and the kids feel scared and awkward. And it's like, this is an animated movie, right? And it really shows you much, and I should have mentioned this when I talked about Princess Mononoke, that the medium should not just be relegated to children, or just like this medium's only used to make kid movies. Like, no, you can tell adult storylines with animation. You can have like adult characters, mature characters, and you can showcase them in animation. And I think this movie does that for a lot of it. Same with Princess Mononoke. And it's great. And again, if you have a love for superheroes, if you grew up with comics, this has all that. Or a love for spy movies. This has all of that. It's great. Beautiful movie, Chad. And a great ending. I love that one scene when they're about to confront Syndrome's robot. And Bob, Mr. Incredible, he's just like, I'll take care of it. And she's like, why? Why do you want to do this? Why do you do this by yourself? Always running off. And he's like, I'm scared. She's like, why are you scared? She's like, I'm scared I'll lose you again. It's like, oh, such a beautiful moment where he realized like it wasn't. I realized my greatest adventure wasn't being a superhero, was having this family. He just finally realized that. I was like, it's such a great message. It's a beautiful film. And it shows the love for the superhero genre, which at the time, which was still finding itself, chat. This was pre Dark Knight, pre Iron Man, and they were still kind of figuring things out. We had gotten things like Spider-Man, X-Men and stuff, right? Blade, but they were still having their issues, where it was like on a consistent basis producing a lot of great content. But I think at the time it was like the great superhero film. I think you can easily make an argument that this is the greatest superhero film of all time. And I wouldn't bat no. I'd be like, yeah, I can easily see that. That's my I guess my bottom 5, Chad. Not bad bottom 5, I'd say. But we got to move on to my top 5, and my 5th favorite movie of all time is Steven Spielberg's Jurassic Park. I know I've talked a lot of negative things about Spielberg over the last 20 years. I haven't been the biggest fan of many of his movies, but back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, he was firing on all cylinders, chat. And for me, there's one other movie that I think of when I hear the name Steven Spielberg. But one of the films I always think of is Jurassic Park. Obviously, it's an adaptation of Michael Crichton's original novel. And even at the time, chat, like Michael Crichton, Spielberg knew Mike Crichton had something with this. He's like, we got to turn this into a movie. The idea of this industrialist, this billionaire, this geneticist, wants to bring back dinosaurs and put a theme park around them, entertain the masses. Chat. Already, that's a recipe for disaster, but a whole lot of fun and a very entertaining movie. I think for a lot of people, this was also, I mean, not to say that we didn't have CGI effects beforehand, but seeing CGI like in this way, which made dinosaurs look real, I think blew a lot of people away. Certainly did for me. And but even like the puppetry and the animatronics, the practical effects in this movie still hold up, even more so than the CGI, bringing that, making it feel real. You can go out and touch it. Like all those scenes, like hold up, to this day. It captures the wonder of dinosaurs, but also how terrifying, the terror of what they are. Literally monsters. Literally monsters, chat, walking the face of the earth again. Like how scary that would be. And we see that terror and wonder through the eyes of a great cast of characters, chat. Everyone from Sam Neill to Laura Dern to Jeff Goldblum, right? To Wayne Knight, Samuel L. Jackson, chat. All these kids, like all these personalities, the lines they say, clever girl. I mean, there's so many iconic things about this movie, but it's perfectly paced. Like I just love how. And it's like none of the other Jurassic Park films were able to replicate this. And it's so frustrating because I feel like there were so many opportunities to still tell great stories in this franchise. They just never did. Like this film it should have been a one and done. It should be like, they shouldn't have made any other movies after this one. Everything from the Lost World. I mean, you can find some fun in like in Jurassic Park 3. But everything in Lost World, Jurassic Park 3, all the Jurassic World films, like forget about it. Kick them to the curb, chat. Broom them fast. All right? Like all we really need is Jurassic Park. And they spared no goddamn expense. All right, they literally did. They put everything they had in this movie. They improved upon the original book, in my opinion, which I've read the original book. It's a lot darker, but I don't know. This is the changes that Spielberg made, that his writers made. I think it was the right one. Like Sir Richard Attenborough, who plays the owner of the park, John Hammond. Like in the book, he's just an asshole. He says he doesn't care, but that's somebody like this guy that has like this vision. He wants to create wonder. It's not just even about the money, but he's just so blinded by the wonder. He doesn't see the terror behind it. And he has all these people coming in there, whether it be, Dr. Alan Grant or like Jeff Goldblum, as Dr. Ian Malcolm, one of my favorite fictional characters of all time, telling him like, no, it's great. And then it sets up everything for the chaos. Like we have the wonder initially, and then we have the terror right after. And it's indeed terror. Like there's a lot of this movie, despite not being as dark as the original novel, a lot of this plays as a creature feature. A lot of this plays as a horror film. And it's very effective. Everything from the Tyrannosaurus Rex to the Dilophosaurus that fucking melts Wayne Knight's eyeballs to the Velociraptors later on in the film, chat, in the last third. It's great. And all the lines and the set pieces, it's just the right amount. But again, I go back to this. It's the conversations that these characters have. Like you look at all those other movies, the sequels, like there doesn't feel like there's like actual conversation, people like discussing like the ramifications of something like this. It's always like, we got to move to the next set piece. We got to go to the next thing. We got to go this, that, and other. It's like, oh my God, so stupid. They're like, those are really stupid. The thing is, like Jurassic Park on paper, or you told someone like that, it's like, this sounds like a stupid movie. But the way in which the story is told, the way in which the actors are just so earnest, and the way in which the effects are being used, it comes across incredibly intelligent and smart. And I think that's what has made this movie succeed. That's why this movie stands above all those other films, because it's fucking smart at the end of the day, which those other movies are just not. But yeah, Jurassic Park, my number 5 favorite film. And also I think it was the movie that made me fall in love. I think all kids love dinosaurs. Most kids, I would say. And it was the movie that made me fall in love with dinosaurs. Think they were so cool. And then later as a dog, I'm thinking like, no, let's not bring these things back. These are fucking monsters. Let's not do it. They're kaiju. They're not even technically dinosaurs in the movie, we find out. They're spliced with different animal DNA, like frog DNA and stuff. But yeah, it's great. And I could put this movie on anytime. Boom, quote it. And throughout the entire film, know what they're going to say before they say it. Great movie, chat. So Jurassic Park, my 5th favorite film of all time. My favorite movie of all time. Or my fifth favorite movie of all time, I should say. Moving on from that, chat. Oh, number 4. Big Trouble in Little China. Now, you guys know I am a huge John Carpenter fan. I think he is one of the most underappreciated directors of all time. I feel like almost he might have been born in the wrong decade. I feel like if he was making movies now, people would go like, I totally see what you're doing. But he has made some of the most influential genre films of all time. Films, again, they were ahead of their time. And I think one of the films that was the most ahead of its time, because people didn't even understand it back in the day, was Big Trouble in Little China. All right? Starring, Kurt Russell, James Hahn, which people might have seen recently, and something like Everything Everywhere All at Once. Like, the thing with Big Trouble in Little China, people, they think, like, oh, it's that weird magic kung fu movie. It's like, yeah, it's a weird magic kung fu movie. No doubt, where you follow the character of Jack Burton. He goes on an adventure with his friend Wayne to stop an evil sorcerer that's thousands of years old, who's trying to find a woman so he can become mortal again and not live in, like, a living hell anymore, and fight all sorts of monsters and rival gangs in San Francisco, Chinatown, and all sorts of other entities and spirits. But the thing is, the movie was a critique on a lot of action films of the time, because a lot of action films, you think about it, whether it be Stallone or Schwarzenegger, I'd say I'm dismissing those movies. There's a lot of entertaining Schwarzenegger, Stallone. You pick an action film star of the 70s or 80s. Those are great. But a lot of them repeated the same things we saw over and over and over again, right? And they usually always went by this. It's like, hey, we follow the handsome white lead actor. He has the dopey and or comedic minority sidekick, and they do their thing. They save the day. And that's that, right? They defeat the bad guy. This movie has the main white lead in the film, the action hero, and he's not the smartest man in the room. Matter of fact, he's the dumbest. Throughout this movie, Jack Burton, Chad, he's an idiot. He doesn't know what the hell's going on. And he doesn't even realize that he is the sidekick to the minority character in the film, Wayne. Like, Wayne technically is the lead of the movie. It's him trying to rescue his beloved girl from James Hahn, throughout the film. David Lopan. He doesn't realize that even till the end. And he's constantly getting his ass kicked. He's constantly making a fool of himself. But he also has these competent moments as well. He clearly has his loyalty, to his friend. And it just has this great sense of humor throughout. It has these like really cool, over-the-top, mystical, magical kung fu action scenes. Like, it always feels like it's at an 11. And Kurt Russell, it's like everyone feels like they're in on the joke too, but again, they're playing it really earnestly. But at the time, like, clearly executives didn't understand this movie. I think a lot of audiences didn't get it at the time, what it was trying to do. Famously, like the opening scene of this movie when Egg Shen, kind of like the elder mystical magical character who assists Jack Burton and Wayne throughout the movie, it's got the rival David Lopan. Like, that whole sequence when he's talking to the lawyer and, like, Egg Shen's like, you leave Jack Burton alone. He saved us. Like, that was done after principal photography, because studio executives like, one of their notes was, we need to make Jack Burton look more heroic. He's an idiot. And John Carpenter said, that's the point. He's an idiot. But since that time, there's been like a weird backlash against the movie, which I do not. It's like, I don't. There has been some people that say this movie's racist, and it's like, shut the fuck up. You don't know what you're talking about. Like, the movie's like, is anything but racist. Like, it's actually kind of critiquing the films that have the goofy, dumb minority sidekick in it. Like, that's what it's actually doing. But you have so many people out there that think that it's the opposite. It's like, no, you dumbass. That's not what it's doing at all. But despite that small contingent of people, I think in retrospect, this movie has garnered more of a fan base. I mean, to the point where they were almost trying to do a remake with The Rock, which would have been weird. Glad they didn't end up doing that, yeah. But, over time, people have finally understood what John Carpenter was actually doing. And it's cemented itself as one of the great, 80s action films, action comedies. And it's been newly appreciated. But I've continued to appreciate it for years. It's a fantastic film. It's so smart that people don't give it credit for being so. But yeah, great film. And for those of you who are interested in James Hahn, You know, seeing him pop up in something like Everything Everywhere All at Once. Like, you know, he's had a career since like the 1950s. He's been working for 70 years. He's 90 plus years old. This is like one of his like defining roles too. He is so funny as David Lopan. Not supposed to get it, Mr. Burton. And then it has one of the greatest villain on-screen deaths of all time, where Jack Burton, who is an idiot, they do give him a win, Chad. They do give him a win. Where Jack, he's always talking about like, oh, it's all in the reflexes, right? And it's a great callback. Where he throws the knife at David Lopan, fucking whiffs it completely. David Lopan picks it up. He's like, nice knife, Mr. Burton. Goodbye, Mr. Burton. He throws it back in, and fucking Jack catches it and throws it right back and fucking hits him in the head and kills him. And everyone's like, what? No one can believe it. And he turns around and is like, it's all in the reflexes. It's like, it's so good. Oh, it's so good, Chad. I absolutely adore it. I can put this on anytime. Love it. Love the film. Big Trouble in Little China. That's not the only John Carpenter movie I have on my top 10 favorite movies list, Chad. I had to talk about my number 3 favorite film, and it's a John Carpenter movie. And that movie is John Carpenter's The Thing. The 1982 remake. A lot of people forget, like, this is actually a remake from the original 1950s The Thing, which is that entertaining movie. It's funny enough, you could tell John Carpenter was a fan of The Thing, because if you remember watching another great John Carpenter horror film, Halloween, one of the characters, the little girl in the movie whose name I forget at the top of my head, one of the films that she's watching when Michael is stalking and murdering people is the original Thing. It's so funny. Then he would go ahead and do his own remake. But I feel like this remake, it's even more closer to the original source material, chat, where we're following this organism that was buried in the ice thousands of years ago, millions of years ago, however long ago, chat, and is able to absorb and take on the appearance of people, of animals, of organic matter. And we are aware of the famous tagline, you know, man is the safest place to hide. And like the idea of a creature like that, it's like that, first of all, is terrifying, because you're like, who is the thing? Where is the thing? That's already like really disconcerting and really ominous. But on top of that, you're in an environment that is as dangerous, because you can't leave, because this movie takes place like in Antarctica in the early 1980s. So even if you want to try to escape this thing, you don't trust anyone around you, because one of the big themes of this movie is paranoia. You can't leave. You can't go. You're going to freeze to death in minutes. It's like you're stuck. And so it's like, how we got to deal with the situation. And like even how this movie starts, which is that excellent. And John Carpenter's always done his like great scores throughout his movie, but I like that he brought in Ennio Morricone. Who's probably best known for a lot of his scores for like westerns and things, right? Good, Bad, and Ugly. But that opening score, coupled with just the showcasing of like those icy cliffs and we just falling a helicopter, it's figuratively and literally a great cold opening, because we just found this helicopter and shooting at this dog. It's like, why are you shooting this dog? What's going on? You know? And sets that whole thing up where this dog suddenly goes to this American Arctic research camp. These guys are in the helicopter. Norwegian, not Swedes, Mac, not Swedes, trying to kill this dog. They don't understand, end up dying. And it's like, okay, something's weird is going on. And then before we even see any creature stuff, before we see this, and it's so amazing, like the practical effects in this movie, Chad, this movie's now over 40 years old, 41 years old, and the practical effects still hold up to this day. Rob Bottin, I think, did the practical effects of this film. Glorious. It is gooey. It's grisly. It's goopy. Everything you would want. But before we even get that, like, you already know, like, something's wrong with that dog. Like, the way it's moving around and the way it's looking. Like, that dog's a fantastic actor. I mean, it's amazing. I think it's like half wolf or something, but the way it just stares, how still it's, like, looking at you, it's like, that's not a dog. Something's weird about it, right? And setting up, and then when it finally reveals itself as this abomination is attacking these other dogs, it only makes you feel bad. You're like, oh, it is just a monster that can turn anything it wants and try to escape. And you realize, like, oh shit, it's absorbing these guys who are here. Which again, an amazing supporting cast, chat, of Kurt Russell and Keith David and Wilfred Brimley. Watch Clark and watch him close. I'm okay. I want to come back inside, man. Hey, man. Let me back inside. I love Wilford Brimley. I think is like super underrated in this movie. It's like so many great moments. Like the one part where he starts freaking out. It starts like he attacks windows with the axe. He's like, I'll go. He just like starts smashing it. It wants to be us. It knows where we are. Like all that. Oh, it's amazing. I love all that. You fucking It becomes the thing. He's messing people up. Yeah, and when we see the practical effects, and that's great for those scenes, but then in between all that, we have this group of guys who just like, who originally were friends, some aren't, but the relationships start to unravel. They don't trust each other anymore, and they got to contend with this entity, also contend with the beginning of winter in Antarctica, which is pretty rough. There's also just other things too that because I've probably seen this movie. I don't know. I watch this movie maybe like 2 or 3 times a year. So I've seen a lot. So I probably first watched this when I was like a teenager. So I maybe have seen this film, oh God, over the last 15 years. I don't know, let's say 15 years. 2, 3 times. I don't know, 50 times maybe, 60 times. A lot. I've seen it dozens upon dozens of times. And there's just certain things you pick up on that maybe like John Carpenter intended. Like you notice like with Kurt Russell's character of R.J. McCready. Like he's a helicopter pilot in the movie, but you notice like he has a drink in his hand the entire time. Like most of the scenes he's in, especially in the first 2/3, he's always drinking. He's always drinking whiskey. It's like he's a fucking alcoholic. A lot of these guys I imagine would be alcoholic, but there's something about that. It's like, even like his lines in his dialogue, he's like, I just want to get up in my fucking cabin and drink. That's it. Like, this guy went through something. I think in, like, the notes, like, the character notes John Carpenter wrote, like, he was a Vietnam vet, and he was a helicopter pilot, and he saw, like, all that horrifying stuff, and it changed him, it warped him, and maybe that's why he's an alcoholic, why he does this, why he just he wants to be alone for most of the time. But, I don't know, it's just you pick up on those details after you watch a movie enough, and you just start to appreciate it even more upon, like, a rewatch. And it's just great. Just little bits of dialogue, and it just I'm a huge sucker for films that like horror movies, not like creature feature. I love creature features and body horror, which this has plenty of body horror. I mean, the things that these people turn into is so grotesque and terrifying. But the idea that you're in close proximity to the creature, and then what's outside, like you can't just go out because it's death. It's just like all that just mixed together. It's like, it's like my ultimate nightmare, my ultimate horror fantasy, if you will. But I just love that scene, and you guys know what I'm talking about, when they're all on the couch and they're all tied up, and suddenly it's Palmer, right? It's Palmer. They're testing the bloods, and of course everyone likes Palmer because Palmer, he's the fucking hippie guy. He's smoking his doobies. Like, hey man, they got temples, they got pyramids in the Amazon, man. It's the way it is. Chariots of Fire, man. Read it. And then, like, they test his blood, and it shoots out. And it's like, whoa, because no one expected that because he's funny and everyone likes Palmer. And then he just starts transforming. And it's like, they're trying to get out. It's like, oh, my God. And he fucking goes, he Spider-Mans to the wall. Like, that effect to this day, I love that effect where he goes, boop. He goes right up to the wall. It's like, and he just crashes down again. But then you have, like, I forget Gary. You have Gary's quote. It's like, well, if you gentlemen are done, I wouldn't like to spend winter tied to this fucking couch. It's like so many iconic lines in this movie that just nailed them. I had stapled in my brain. Absolutely love it, Chad. And the defibrillator scene. The defibrillator scene where, what's his name? Norris. I know these names, Chad. Norris. Who, you think is having a heart attack. What's going on? And they get poor fucking Copper up there and to do the defib, and it doesn't work the second time. It doesn't work the first time, the second time, the third time. The teeth open up and they fucking bite his arms off. And it's like, oh! And the thing, it detaches, and it's all because it's all separate organisms, Chad. It's not just one. That's when McCready gets the idea. It's like, wait a minute, this thing is multiple things. Every piece is going to try to defend itself and try to live. And he becomes that little crab head. You gotta be fucking kidding. And they burn it. Yeah, there's so many moments in this movie. I want to watch it now. And it's definitely OG. It's OG Among Us. It's cosmic horror at its best. It's sci-fi horror at its best. It's body horror at its best. And I do think it's John Carpenter's best movie. And that's, again, he has made some of my favorite films of all time. Literally Big Trouble in Little China. If I ever do another top 10 list, I could do here's another of my favorite 10 movies. I could probably put some more on there, chat. But for me, yeah, this is my favorite John Carpenter movie, and it's my third favorite movie of all time. But it's not my second favorite movie. My second favorite movie of all time, chat, is Steven Spielberg's Raiders of the Lost Ark. Now, Steven Spielberg, funny enough, before Steven Spielberg went and made Raiders of the Lost Ark, he had intended to make a James Bond movie. Like he always wanted. He was a huge James Bond fan growing up. And I think this was like coming off the success of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, another great movie that he made. And George Lucas was like, no, I don't make that. I have this idea for this adventure, this archaeologist. And that idea was Raiders of the Lost Ark, before they even had Indiana Jones in the titles, right? And it is a total homage to the action adventure serials that George Lucas and Steven Spielberg watched as kids, like from the 1930s and 40s. We're following this swashbuckling adventure that's going to all these different places around the world, discovering artifacts, fighting bad guys, fighting Nazis, fighting cultists, right? And doing all of the with a grin, getting the hell beat out of him, but succeeding. I think it is the genre-defining movie of action-adventure films. I think it's the one that is, yes, you had those serials before Indiana Jones. You had other action-adventure movies before Raiders of the Lost Ark, of course. But I feel like this is all those movies distilled in this movie, and it's done so incredibly well. Everything from the characters himself, from Harrison Ford's performance. Like he's not constantly, he's not quipping, he's not a hard ass, he's not stoic. He's an amalgamation of all those different things into one person. He's got a lot of depth to him. He's kind of like that quintessential American hero, in my opinion. Played to great effect by, Harrison Ford. This was like, I think for a lot of people, this was some of the best films of his career were in the late 70s and then throughout the 80s, of course. I think for a lot of people, when they think of Harrison Ford, they think of Han Solo or they think of Indiana Jones, right? But just a great character, obviously, Indiana Jones. But even like how this movie opens up, there's a sense of mystery and intrigue. How we're I think we're in Peru initially or somewhere in South America, chat. And even like certain things too, like you see the Paramount logo, right? Because Paramount. And it transitions to like that mountain, right? It goes in the matte painting to the mountain, and we see that, and we see this guy come out. We don't even see him at first, right? And we have all these people that are with him, and at one point, like one guy pulls a fucking gun on him, and it's all from the shadows, and Indy pulls out the whip and hits it. It's like, oh, and he runs away, and then Harrison Ford walks into the screen, and we see it's like who he really is. I think it has one of the greatest cold openings of any movie, of him trying to find this golden fertility statue, right? Teaming up with Alfred Molina, who ends up getting fucking speared, and just the rolling boulder. It's like all this iconic imagery that has since defined the character and the genre itself. It's all within like 10 minutes. Like we already get like an adventure of Indiana Jones before the Ark of the Covenant, all that stuff. Within the first 10 or 15 minutes, where you get a villain, get all these natives chasing after him, because he's appropriating shit. Flying off, establishing his phobia of snakes. Like that first 10 to 15 minutes does so much to build that character, build that world, build that. There's also, the other thing too is I think a lot of people think like, oh, Indiana Jones is straight just action adventure. There's a lot of horror in that movie. There's a lot of horror in the movie. There's a lot of people getting killed and murdered and maimed and squished and stabbed. It's like, wow, there's a lot of death in Indiana Jones, And then I also like the fact that it's a period piece too, because that makes it like timeless. I love that it's like set in like what the it's like 1936, so it's like mid to late 1930s, right? And he goes off on this adventure, hired basically by the U.S. government to take down the fucking Nazis. And chat, one of the enemies of cinema that we love to see get killed is Nazis. And seeing Indiana Jones take on fascism, kill so many Nazis by the dozens is so thrilling and fun. It's great. And we get to travel all around the world. Him killing Nazis. And he kills Nazis in Nepal. He kills Nazis in Egypt. He kills Nazis in the Mediterranean. It's like all over the place. We see him. And it has like these great action set pieces, from all the chases to like just the moment to moment brawls, chat. Like there's something about that. It's goofy, but it just fits Indiana Jones. That canned punch effect, when you just hear it, it's like, oh, it's so satisfying. That puh, or something like that when he's fighting the giant, Nazi guy in the plane. You got Karen Allen. Karen Allen does such a great job as playing as Marion. Wonderful, just supporting. Really co-lead of the film, the female co-lead of the movie. because she's not like your typical. They do have some damsel distress of her stuff, but she's not like this. Oh, Indy. She's not like Kate Capshaw or whatever. You know, she's like I'm a fucking drinker. You know, I fucking drink. I can drink any goddamn man under the table. You know, this is something about her. She's just got that almost like a tomboyish attitude. And it's like, oh, this is a great foil for Indiana Jones, right? You would think, oh yeah, he's gonna rescue the girl, but there's a little something different about her, and I like that she stands out, you know. But anyway, yeah, just the fight scenes and the supporting characters. Sala is such a great supporting character in this movie, chat. You know, and we just get to see Nazis die. I mean, what's better than that? It's great. It's great. That's another movie I can watch over and over and over again. And then you had all the sequels like Temple of Doom, which, you know, I don't think is as good as Raiders of the Lost Ark. I had fun with it. Last Crusade, which I think is almost as good as Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's right there. It's kind of like almost neck and neck. But yeah, no, Raiders is the quintessential action adventure film. It is the genre-defining movie of that specific genre, chat. And it has one of the greatest film icons of all time, which is Indiana Jones. It does so much right. I mean, you can argue, some of the effects are dated. It's like, sure. But aesthetically, it all feels as it should. And that's why it's my number 2, my second favorite film of all time. But it's not number 1. My number 1 movie of all time, at least of right now, of this hour, of today, of this week, is Ridley Scott's Alien. I have talked about Alien, the original 1979 film, Alien franchise, since I started streaming. This is kind of like my perfect idea, representation of just a horror film. As you guys know, I love sci-fi horror. I love body horror. I love horror movies set in space because I find space terrifying, right? I mean, what is truly out there? What's on the other side? What's on this uncharted world? And this movie, it's the perfect representation of all those fears, but also just the mystery and the wonder of that. Like, I love the premise. It's not like a lot of sci-fi horror films that followed afterwards adopted Alien, used Alien. To this day, Chad. There's no doubt about it. 40 plus years old, you know, it's influenced so many movies, right? It just shows you how effective it originally was. But I love the premise of this film, where we're not following space scientists. We're not following, like, the military. We're not following, you know, something like that's out of Star Trek or something like that. No. We are following this group of blue-collar workers in space. Literally space truckers, towing this space oil from point A to point B. They get a distress call. They're obligated according to their contract. I just love how, like, you just, through the dialogue, that's the other thing. I love that the dialogue feels so real. It feels so conversational. It's not filled of space mumbo jumbo. It just feels like, you know, like, yeah, any normal conversation that we would have, any normal conversation anyone, like, at the office would have, you know, or any blue-collar job. It just feels like, it's just that they happen to be in space. But they get this distress call, and they have to answer because of their contracts. So dealing with the corporatism in there, too. Like, we have to do this. It's like, okay. Might get a commission from it, though. It's like, oh, that'd be good. They land this uncharted world, which looks horrifying. And one guy, you know, John, John Hurt gets a little too curious and gets his face impregnated, Chad, and he brings an alien on board, which already, again, the face hugger, it's already like, what the hell is that? What's on Kane's face? Let's get off of him. Hey, someone freeze him. Why ain't they freezing him? He's like, I don't know why they're freezing him, man. Right, that's what I'm telling you. It's already like really disconcerting and weird. And then later on, comes off of him. He seems fine. And then that dinner scene. That's when it shifts. It's always like, oh, you know, kind of at ease. But then as soon as he just starts gyrating, as soon as he just starts losing control of himself, like, that is, like, to me, like, one of the greatest sequences in not just in horror, but I think in film. Because it's like, what is happening? It's because it's that sense of normalcy. It's like, all this family, these friends, these coworkers, we're eating the shitty food we always eat, man. And then all of a sudden, one of your coworkers starts having, like, an attack of something. Like, what's going on? They don't even know how to function. Like, what do we do with this guy? And then this thing bursts out of his chest, and then it runs. Always like, oh, and just the shock The shock of like what that is, that during the birth scene. And then they have to like, we got to capture, we got to deal with this thing. And this thing grows to an immense size and starts picking them off one by one by one. And I love how in the movie, like, you don't even know like Sigourney Weaver is like the main actress. You know, she's like the survivor. You know, she is the final girl, if you will. But you know, it's not indicated like in the first third of that movie that like she's the main character that we're following, right? Like it could be Tom Skerritt for all we know. It could be Captain Dallas. But like all the sequences in that movie are great. There's just like shots which feel so inspired. Obviously, you know, H.R. Giger, who did all the designs and the production for the movie, that made it look like the way it is. But there's just like this horrifying imagery. Like at some points we see the alien like literally like almost in a Christ-like pose, like in that room. Why is it so moist on this ship? Why is water it's like so watery? It's dripping everywhere. What the fuck's going on? And that's the other thing. Like, this is not some idyllic looking ship. It's not like a ship from Star Trek where everything looks clean. There's carpets everywhere. It's like this ship is grimy, rusted. Everything's brown. Everyone keeps smoking cigarettes. Everything that was white is yellowed over. It's like gross. But we see like the alien just hanging out on these chains. You just see it floating there, and it comes down, you know, kills poor Harry Dean Stanton, or at least in the theatrical version, turns him into an egg in the director's cut. But just the anatomy of the alien, where, you know, it's a total, you know, the movie definitely has themes of rape and fears of pregnancy and all that, and sex. I mean, its head is so phallic, you know, clearly that's what it's representing, like a penis, all that. And just takes them all out one by one by one. And then there's just such a great sense of mystery to the movie, too. Like, how is this creature operating? Why is it doing what it's doing? You know, like, there's moments when it goes after Lambert, and I still don't know to this day, like, what did it do to her? Like, when it's moving, and one of my favorite shots, they never repeat this in the other films. Never do. And I love it. But there's one shot where Lambert, like, it's coming towards her, and the alien just starts kind of like feeling the air around it like this with its arms. Like it doesn't even know what's going on. It's like, what is it doing when it's doing this? It's got dance moves, but it's like it's so foreign to us. It's like, what is that? And then it rapes her, maybe? Like, does it rape her? Is it vibing? Is it, man, it's fucking vibing. I always like that scene because they never show that off again like the other movies. You never see the alien move that way again. I was like, this is weird. I like it though. And it's like it's heavily implied that like it raped her. And it's like, huh. It's like, it's really interesting. And then the point where, you know, Ripley's like the only one left. He killed off all these. And a great supporting cast, chat. I mean, yeah, I always mentioned, you know, Tom Skerritt, Sigourney Weaver, Yaphet Kotto as Parker, you know. Harry Dean Stanton is great. Yeah. And I just love how it, despite the fantastical circumstances and environment, it feels so real, you know? And I mean, you had a great sequel to Aliens, which James Cameron did the thing where he's like, hey, I'm not going to just do the same movie again. I'm going to still have the same aesthetic, obviously honor the original film, but now it's from the military's perspective. Now it's more of a war movie, right? And just after that, they're just never able to replicate, never able to advance the franchise in an intelligent way. But for me, Alien is such an intelligent movie. It's so smart, and then the themes it's tackling, how it tackles capitalism and consumerism, and, you know, the abuse of workers. It's great social messages, chat, but it's also just a really entertaining and terrifying horror film. And that's why Alien is my, at least right now, it is. I think it's my favorite movie of all time. It's perfect in my eyes. It does so many things right. But that, my friends, that is my top 10 favorite movies of all time. What about you guys? What are some of your favorite movies of all time? Let me know. I hope everyone enjoyed the video, and I want to take the time to tell you about my Patreon, Class in the Glass, which offers hundreds of film commentaries and video reactions to numerous movies, TV shows, and cartoons. If you're a fan of shows like Batman the Animated Series and Avatar The Last Airbender, or films like Aliens and Raiders of the Lost Ark, my Patreon is the platform for you. Currently, I'm doing a subathon to reach 75 subs on the platform. If we hit 75 subs, we'll be able to start voting on the next edited YouTube reaction, which will include actual clips and scenes from the movies and shows I comment over. Choose from such films as Fire and Ice, Masters of the Universe, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, or Spawn. Subscribing at any tier level is appreciated, and feel free to give feedback at any time. Thank you again for watching the video, and see you next time.